All right. So welcome everyone to our session on balancing teaching, research, and life. I'm really excited that our panelists have joined us. I'm looking forward to learning from all of them. Our new faculty kind of requested this session, and I thought, this is a good session. I could learn from some of my friends. So I'm glad that our panelists agreed to join us. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rebecca Mushter. I'm a faculty member in graphic design and interaction design. I've been here for 8 years, and I'm the associate director of our teaching and learning center. And we have a bunch of panelists with us today, which I'm going to have them introduce themselves. So Carolina.
Hello, I'm Carolina Ilia. I'm in Department of Physics. I'm doing research in condensed matter physics related to polymers, related to capillary condensation, related also to physics education and different projects as Women in Physics.
Thanks. We'll pass it to Francisco.
Hi, I'm Francisco Suarez. I'm an assistant professor of the Communication Studies Department. My background is in video production, storytelling, and script writing.
Great. Jason?
Hi, my name is Jason Duffy. I'm in the Counseling and Psychological Services Department. Most of my research has been qualitative in nature, looking at ways to integrate the natural world into counseling and educational settings to benefit students, clients, and supervisees. I've also done some research related to utilizing metaphor and story in creative ways to enhance pedagogy.
Thanks, Jason. And we'll pass it to Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Reher. I am the chair of the Department of Communication Studies. And my area of specialty is in rhetoric, specifically feminist criticism and representation. And I'll also add, as we talk about this, that what I think germane to our conversation today is I have 3 small children that are 4, 5, and 7. So that also adds another layer to my day.
Yes, I hear you. And we'll pass it to Maggie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie. I'm in the Criminal Justice Department. I've been here for 4 years now. And my scholarship tends to focus on critical perspectives of crime and punishment and violence against women and feminist perspectives on violence.
So as you can see, we have folks from a wide variety of backgrounds and disciplines, and really diverse perspectives on what we mean by research, what we mean by scholarship. So hopefully having this mix will give everyone a feel for how they might fit in and how they might be able to balance their time and things. So to start off, I'd love to hear each of you describe how and when you make space to write, make, or research. And let's start with Francisco.
How and when? Okay. How I'm a very organized person. I think that comes from my background in TV production. We believe that pre-production is the success of any TV production that you create. So I worked for many years in the production of MTV Music Award, where basically if you don't have the time of organize yourself, you're not going to make it. And you finish a show and you literally start the next day creating the next episode, the next award show for the following year. So for me, how is about pre-organizing. I do normally a to-do list of every week of what are my priorities. That to-do list for me is my guidance. If I don't have that to-do list or is not in my to-do list, it doesn't exist. And thank God technology, Google Calendar. I say to my students, if you don't send me a Google Calendar invite, I don't, and the day that Google Calendar doesn't exist or start having problem, I think I'm going to lose my mind. So I try to organize. That's how. If I don't pre-organize my time, I don't think that will happen. And because I pre-organize, I keep a window open. Of course, summers are the time to really take advantage that we are not teaching. But during the semesters, I normally do Wednesdays to do my work that is related to, I book it. I literally put it in my calendar so that time is booked. Do I use it? Not necessarily all the time, but at least it's booked. At least I know that, okay, Wednesdays is the time I'm supposed to be working in my creative work and my scholarship. But it's all about, I think for all of us, right? It's all about pre-organizing. What are your priorities? Because I do think that in academia, we do juggle with, I don't know how many thousand tasks, but thousands, like teaching and be part of a committee. And so I do think at some point, if you don't pre-organize in a to-do list, you start doing something that maybe is not necessary at that point. And so for me, I start with to-do list, I do my calendar, and I go with that. And it seems to work so far.
It sounded like a little bit of a warning, Francisco, about not breaking promises to yourself, right? So if it's in the calendar, stop breaking dates with yourself.
Exactly.
I know I also use a tool called OmniFocus to kind of prioritize my tasks as well. How about someone from a different area? How about Carolina, right? From the sciences, doing really different kind of work, right? How are you balancing your time?
Yes, so this depends also on the time. For example, when I started here in 2008, the first year I was waking up at 4 in the morning because I had a course at 8 in the morning or 9 in the morning. And the first hours of the morning I was doing research. Then I was coming to work and doing teaching and then deal with my students, etc. So I did this for the first year, even though I'm a nocturnal person, so to speak. So I like to work nighttime. I also select one day, how Francisco said, one day, my day usually was Thursday, one day dedicated to research or, writing papers, writing grants. And I try to keep that day opened. Being organized is very important. Sometimes I'm more focused on the teaching part, for example, around midterms, around my deadlines with my students. Sometimes I'm focusing on research, for example, around a deadline for grant or for when I have a conference, I need to be there and I need to do this. I work pretty intense. So when I'm focused, I can be focused for 12 hours. That's really bad in a way, but that's how I work. So it's like feast and famine. Well, not so much famine. I generally am very intense, and then I have, of course, some time to relax. But this depends on the time and on the person. If you prefer a more regular schedule, then I would recommend waking up and doing research and then going to teach. And it depends on every person. But this is what worked for me so far. I cannot hear you, Rebecca. Okay.
Carolina, I think you didn't mention this, but I'm pretty sure I know this about you, that you use student researchers and work with them as well to kind of combine your kind of teaching life with your research life. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage that?
Yes, so I always work with students. Every semester I have students and we work together. And every summer I did research with my students. We either work here or in my lab, or we went to Nebraska to work, and I had 2-3 students coming with me. So again, this is a very big time investment and I work with them. I also work with former students and present students actually and alumni in working on some books. So in this case, each of us are working on some problems and we give back to each other to check and to discuss. But I did most of my work on my problems in the library while my older son was doing his homework. I was going there, or we were going almost every evening to work on each of our tasks. So I wrote actually my second book in the library. So I love the library. So it's a very nice atmosphere. So yeah, it's wonderful collaborating with students, and of course it's very rewarding because they don't expect to become co-authors, after finishing undergraduate, and they are really wonderful and full of energy. So I love doing that.
Maggie, Jason, or Jessica, do any of you want to jump in? Jason?
Sure. Yeah. I know I agree with what a lot of people have been saying about, knowing your personality type, when is the best time for you to work. A couple things I would recommend, having a research collaborator, right? Or a couple folks. If when you're doing this task in isolation, It can be pretty laborious. It can be hard to motivate yourself. And sometimes, just like if you're a workout person, having a workout partner that can hold you accountable when you're not feeling motivated, or you can help them when they're not feeling motivated, has really helped me quite a bit. A lot of my papers that came out of research were written with folks from other universities that I met through professional organizations or conferences. And that really worked out well. And we really played off each other's strengths. For some people, writing that lit review, thinking of more of a traditional research model, right, is quite a daunting task. For some folks, they have, methodology gives you a migraine thinking about how you're going to write your methodology section in a research paper, right? And we were able to really divvy up those tasks. Some of us have more skill related to editing if we're thinking about a submission. And so finding someone that you get along with, you have some shared interest with, is important. And, the folks that I started writing with and doing research with have actually become really close friends. And so that was an added bonus to that whole thing. And so that would be just a word of wisdom that I would have for folks is thinking about reaching out to folks that maybe have more experience than you to get you going. If we're talking to a newer faculty member, the idea of research, I remember when I first got into the field and out of my doctoral program, the idea of doing this huge thing that I just did for a dissertation on my own just seems so daunting. And there's people out there that have gone through the motions. They know what they're doing. They can help you through that process. And it's not as scary as you think it is once you get going with it.
That's such a great point, Jason. I don't think I realized until you were talking about how much the collaborative work gets done and all the other things on my to-do list just sit there, right? Like, right? They get done eventually, but the collaborative stuff gets done a lot faster. And so does stuff that has a deadline, right? Like, submission accepted. Great. I guess I'm going to do that now, right? Absolutely. It has a way of prioritizing itself. I see Maggie's all set to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to add in on the collaboration. Some of my friends from graduate school and I have created what we call our research alliance, right? So we've committed to writing 4 papers in 1 year. I think we're actually on year 3 right now. When I say that, I mean our 1 year has now extended to about 3 years because we're taking a bit longer than we had anticipated. But what's really wonderful about our little research alliance is we each will first author a paper on our research area, and then each other our colleagues will chime in with different pieces, whether they're expert in statistics or a particular theory that we're interested in, or someone who is just going through the paper to check for the spelling, the grammar, the references, and all of that. We have a sort of system where we divvy up the amount of work for each person. And it's been really helpful that I'm working with colleagues that are at R1 and R2 universities, because that keeps me kind of in the loop and more accountable to their deadlines and to their kind of more focused work ethic when it comes to research. So I think that having that kind of outside accountability, as Jason was saying, is absolutely huge. At least it is for me. As far as splitting up my time and how I make time and space for my research, I am the kind of person that needs an entire day to focus on my research. I can't just spend like a couple of hours on one task and then move, to teaching on another task. Like I have to like really clear out my entire day, and like that is all I am doing, right? And I will sit there for as long as it takes for it to get done. So whether it's a few hours or I'm working on a revision and it takes several hours, that's that's I guess how I tend to structure my time for that, is I just kind of clear out a day in my schedule. Usually it's Fridays, but it depends on the courses that I'm teaching and any other commitments that come up.
So along those same lines, right? Like can be easy to get sucked into feeling like you could work 24/7, right? Just like constantly all the time during the semester, during the summer, during breaks. There's no breaks ever, right? We could easily fall into that trap. And obviously we know that's not demonstrating balance, right? And we're talking about balance today, right? So, there's always students that need help, things to grade, things that you can improve in your teaching or research that you're doing, a new project you could take on. The list grows every second, right? So what do you do to keep these demands on your time in check, right? So that you have time to relax, you have time to rejuvenate, and spend time with family and friends. I'm going to ask Jessica to chime in first here on this one.
So I think I'll start with previously Francisco and Jason mentioned scheduling, and I really schedule the whole part of my day. So I don't just schedule, here's the time I'm going to do research or here's the time I'm going to grade. My whole day is scheduled. So I schedule my family time down to, in some cases, the minute. So for example, and I tell my students, I'm very open. 5 o'clock, I turn off. This world does not exist for me. So between 5 and 8 p.m., that's my time with my family. My kids have activities, we do homework, we have dinner together. And my children are still on the younger side, so they're pretty much in bed by 8 or 8:30. And so then I turn back on. And so there are certain nights where I will designate that this night between 8:30 and 10:30 or whatever time, I'll be working again. And so, my husband and I have scheduled Saturday night is our movie night. We watch a movie on Saturday nights, period. We don't mess with that. And so I know that I'm not going to be working on Saturday nights. If I have projects I need to do, I need to schedule the rest of my weekend. So that really is very helpful. The other thing that I have done, which I think when I first say it, I think to a lot of people sounds really counterintuitive because it seems like it's gonna make you less effective. I've taken my work email off of my phone. It just does not exist in that platform because I found that it's really easy to pick it up. Oh, there's this one email. I'm gonna look at it real quick. Okay, I'm gonna respond. And I realized at one point that, my 2-year-old daughter was like, Mama, Mama, Mama. And I was like, yeah, I'm just doing this work thing. And I was not giving her what she needed. And it was technically during that time that's scheduled for family. So I've told my students, my email is not on my phone. So if you email me, you're not going to get an immediate response. But here's when I do respond, and I put it in my syllabus. I'm very upfront about it. I talk about it. I'm spending time with my children, and I want you as students to do the same thing and to have that time where you're tuned out. And I was really nervous they were going to freak out, and they don't. And they like the transparency. So while they might be frustrated that there's not an immediate response, they knew not to expect that from me. I also told my dean that if there's something that she needs to text me, if it's something that has to be done immediately. And so occasionally I get a text like, you need to deal with this right now. And so I know that's something important, but what emergencies do we have on campus, right? We're not, doctors who are in a hospital who are working, who have to run down to the ER to do surgery. And so that's really helped a lot because it makes me more mindful when I am doing email. I know I have this 1 hour to do my email, and then it's turned off. So it makes me more mindful and present when I am doing it, but it also allows me to not even have that distraction because it's so easy when those pings come in to just take care of this thing real quick. And then the final thing that I do, this is as a technique that probably many of you have already done or think about, but I implemented this when I was in graduate school, is the triage approach to work. So it's not just making a to-do list. And I often talk to this about students as well. What are the things that have to be done today? What are the things that have to be done this week? What are the things that can wait a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks? And so constantly I have not just a to-do list, but a priority list. That way I'm always triaging things. And so for example, and you never know when something's going to come in, right? You think you're working on this one case that's really difficult, and then all of a sudden something else comes in that has to be taken care of. Well, then that will take priority. And so I maintain a sort of triage approach to doing work. And I often recommend it to students who are like, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know where to start. What's the thing that has to be done today? And if you don't, something terrible is going to happen. And what are the things that, can sit in the waiting room for a little while and just be really annoyed they're sitting there, but they'll be okay. So those are really the 3 things: is to really schedule my time. I took that email off my phone and to make sure I'm triaging, my priority list and my to-do list.
Boundaries. I'm hearing lots of
Boundaries.
boundaries.
Yep.
Boundaries are good. I certainly do that triage method as well. I use an app to kind of help me with that, but same idea. And I also embrace the idea of inbox zero when I got really overwhelmed because there was just too much crap in my inbox. So all I did was just move it in a different folder. It's still there, it's just in a different folder. And if it's been there for 3 months, I'm probably not going to deal with it. So I just put it in the folder and move on. And then it's just like it clears. It's like, oh, inbox empty. I can breathe again. Right. So we all need to find those ways to kind of set boundaries and reset ourselves for sure. Other folks on the panel want to jump in about kind of setting boundaries. Maggie and then Carolina.
Yeah, just quickly, one thing that I do with my students, from time to time is I gently remind them when my office hours are, and I'll do it the morning of, and I'll include, now with the virtual office hours, right? I'll include like a Google Meets or, Zoom, whatever it is I'm using, and time and time again, I get more students, the hour I, remind them before than I do, if I go for a week without mentioning that I have office hours, right? So I do try to kind of, um, you know, uh, herd them in, right, to like the actual time that I have set aside for them for these kinds of questions so that it's not, draining into other parts of my day or of my week as it is. So sending just that kind of reminder email to all of my classes is super easy with Blackboard. I just, at 9 a.m., I'm like, I have office hours from 10 to noon, drop in and time again, I get, at least a dozen students who, are like, oh yeah, I do have that thing that I needed to talk about. And so kind of, getting them into that particular time frame that I've already set aside for them is really good, really helpful for me.
Great tip, Maggie. Carolina?
I guess even though I'm in physics, art is very important in my life. So what I'm doing, I'm schedule. Well, before COVID, I was scheduling some time to go to concerts and theater with my children or with one of my sons and his friend. And those were really important times. And we were having some weeks when we had a concert every week. So it was really nice. And I invite actually my students as well. I always, besides our homework on the board and so on, I advertise those events on campus, and I tell them that it's really important to make time for, for their mind and for their brain to relax and listen to some good music or watch a theater. And brain is a very complicated device, so to speak. So they may find the solutions for some of their problems while listening to, Beethoven or while watching a play. So some of my students actually join, not near me, but join such events. So that was really important. Right now, I make time to walk with my family. So when we can, we do this every day. And my youngest son instituted a weekly movie night. So so we have some times, but of course I'm available to my students, and I am actually some of them are shy to come to office hours together with other people. So I schedule some special time for them because they don't want to be exposed and so on. But this works very well. But anyways, I actually encourage my students to have some time for art, sometimes for meditation, whatever form they use. And I do this myself because otherwise, how can I ask them or suggest them to do it if I don't do it myself? So yeah, that's very, very helpful for, for a balanced life and for actually productive life.
I love that you all are pointing out the idea of modeling balance for students and encouraging them to find balance as well, right? Like that makes us all have a much healthier environment, right?
Yes.
Jason, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just something quickly, in my field, as a therapist myself, as a small practice and doing all the other research, a lot of my clients are coming in, right? Their lives are out of balance because of COVID, or now their kids are doing school from home, whatever it may be. And I think one of the things we forget is how much control sometimes we actually have over these situations, and kind of learning how to say no, learning how to take stock of how much we have on our plate, and realizing that we can say yes to everything and there'll still be folks asking for more. And so finding what our own balance is important, and practicing ways to say no, right? It, for a lot of us, I know for me personally, I'll speak for myself, my personality type, the way I was raised, what have you, I always like to say yes. I like to please people. I like to make people happy. And so it's been something I've had to work on to learn how to say no, maybe to my chair, and not just say no, but like explain it, or to students, right? And I think we have to teach others how we expect to be treated and where our boundaries are. People by nature will take as much as we can give, because a lot of times they don't know what's going on in our inside our heads or emotionally. And they, you know, we have to let them know when we kind of reach that point where we can't do any more.
Good point. To have boundaries, we must know how to say a 2-letter word. And
it's a hard word to say sometimes, right?
We can spell it, we just can't say it. It's very difficult.
Yes.
Francis, so were you trying to jump in as well?
Well, yeah, because what Jason says is so important. The thing is that if we are more conscious, the idea of having a conscious mind of the quality of time that I want to spend with my family instead of the quantity of time. You know, sometimes I go and walk with my daughter. We have a pond in the back, so we go and walk, and I have to remind myself this. I need to be very conscious that this is maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes walk, but I could use this walk to really have a deep, meaningful conversation with my daughter. Sometimes she rolled the eyes and say, seriously, are we going to be talking about this? Well, it's the time to do it. If we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? So I think if we establish a conscious mind that this is not about the quantity that time that you have, but the quality of time that you have, not only with your family, but with yourself. What is the time that I'm going to dedicate to myself? Thank God I start exercising now more, which is great. So it's a time for me to disconnect and listen music, and just is a treat for me. But the other thing that is very interesting in this equation that we're talking today is the use of technology and how this pandemic have pushed us to be sitting in front of a computer literally 24 hours. I do miss commute to the work, because that commute, when I finish work, I close my computer, I go home. Right? You are in the car, you put public radio, whatever you want to listen, and you disconnect. Now, because we are working more from home, almost 80% of the time, it's very easy to say, well, give me 1 more hour, I'm almost done. And so time passes and it's 8 p.m. and you're still in front of your computer. So I have to remind myself not only to find that quality time, but to understand that technology in some way is not a good thing. And the accessibility that we have to just jump from bed directly to a computer is not necessarily a healthy thing to do.
Great point. And I want to pick up on that thread, which is out of order. So panelists, sorry, going out of order now. But the idea that the pandemic really has shifted things for all of us, right? Caregiving, whether it's for older adults or young children, whatever that might be in our kind of own personal lives, right, is something that is always something we need to balance, but is particularly difficult kind of during the pandemic. So what are some things that you're doing to kind of maintain some of those things? I know you've all talked a little bit about boundaries and things, but can you give us some real tangible tips or one specific thing that you're doing that's like helping keep that working for you, and that like those relationships are staying strong rather than just getting a lot of tension because we're all in the same space, right? Which is a trap that we could all fall into. So we all know that that's a reality that can happen. I don't know who wants to start there. Okay, Carolina.
So one thing we do during pandemia, I try to continue to connect to my colleagues. So I had a group of women from different departments, and we are going once a month to lunch. So right now we have this meeting via Zoom. I also instituted some Zoom meetings every 2 months with my former physics PhD colleagues. So we meet every 2-3 months and we kind of talk and see each of us where we are and what we are doing. So I try to read or do something funny every day, because it is known that humor is very important for increasing immunity, for increasing just the joy for life. And especially if you have children in the house, is just a sense of balance and overall good spirit for all of us. And yeah, besides walk, going out of the house is very, very important. I don't do it every day. We try to do it. We did it this summer every day. Right now, not as much, but this is very important to just go out and walk and breathe. Just breathe. And of course, breathing techniques, meditations daily are very, very important. Whatever form, yoga or whatever form we each of us prefer. So yeah, those are quite important pillars of continuing a life which is as close to normality as we can have nowadays.
Jason?
Yeah, I love the mention of the natural world and the importance of getting outside. Definitely important for our mental health and productivity. One of the things I wanted to mention is that, especially with COVID, and I think going forward, now that we've kind of gotten a taste of what life can be like using Zoom to collaborate or teach or whatnot, we're much more comfortable with it now. But we've kind of had those two worlds blended, right? We had physical space that to our minds denoted, here's work. I'm now sitting in my office. This is where I work. So now I'm in work mindset. And then I walk, I pull in my driveway, my habitually, I go into kind of like, now I'm in a different mode. But now it's like those modes overlap in the same space, right? And I think for a lot of us, that's been a struggle. For me, it's been a struggle. And so what I've really tried to do is, with the space that I have available to me, create a space where it is my workspace, right? And so I have kind of trained myself that when I go into this room and I sit in this area, this is work time. This isn't my phone. This isn't, listening to music. This isn't my kids coming in and out. This is work time, right? It's kind of like what I say to clients, like when they're struggling to sleep. Inevitably, a lot of them have kind of created a situation where their bed is not just for sleep. They watch TV in bed, they play video games in bed. And when they mesh those things, the brain doesn't train itself to think, oh, when I lay down in bed, now it's time to sleep. And I think COVID's done the same kind of thing to a lot of us, that like our brains are like, okay, I have to work, but I'm in my kitchen. I don't understand, it's kind of like, and it's hard to motivate when those things happen. And so one thing I would say is trying to carve out, whether it's going to a local Starbucks, finding a place in the house that really is that workspace as much as possible. And I know there's differences in terms of what space is available to folks. But that would be something I've done and found to help.
That can also be a great strategy during summers, during quote unquote normal times as well. If you're not
Correct.
going into the office, right? Like that you just have kind of a designated time and space to separate that out. I know that's been helpful for me too. I have a very small, I don't think it's really big enough to be a bedroom. It's tiny. Extra room in our house that like we designated as an office early on, and like that door just shuts. It's the space, right? And like non-work life like doesn't come in this room, and like my work life doesn't leave the room either, right? And that really helps. So I agree, Jason, so important. And I want to circle back one more time to some things about like balancing those kind of three pillars as an academic, teaching, service, and research, and maybe ways of figuring out how to prioritize some of those things. And if you each might want to chime in a little bit about that, because I know you're all incredibly active members of our community and as scholars and creative folks. For those of you that don't know these folks, these are super productive people, right? But are able to find the balance between all of these things. So I'd love to hear each of your takes on this. Maybe we can start with Jessica.
Sure. So I do a couple of things. One is, as Francisco mentioned earlier, I keep a Google Calendar, but my Google Calendar I use exclusively for things that are scheduled that are like appointments I can't miss, office hours, classes, June appointments, things like that. But I was finding at one point that I was writing a lot of things that are important, that have deadlines on my Google Calendar, but they were muddling it up and making it really confused. So things like starfish early alerts are due on this date, midterm grades are due on this date, final exams grades are due on this date. Oh, the spring schedule is due, and all those things were important, but and I need to know about them, but I was keeping them on my Google Calendar. So I really sat down and I spent like an hour just thinking to myself what works for me, and so I'm a pen and paper person, and so I have an organizer that I use that has a calendar in it on which I write down the things I need to know about that are deadlines, that aren't necessarily an appointment that I have to be at, or a meeting or something along those lines. So things that don't necessarily belong in Google Calendar, but that I have to keep track of. And it's a big organizer. And so I've got, for each month, there's notepads that or notes that I can use. So I carry it around, I can show it to you. It's this little beast right here. And it's got like, it's organized in such a way that works for me. And everything that happens in a year goes in there. So if you see me in a meeting, you see me with this. And this is where I've got my scheduled, this is the time I'm doing research. Here's my office hours. Here's what I'm working on. And I've got lots of different tabs for all the various projects so I can find it easily. So it's kind of like my little Bible that I carry around with me all the time. And then I have everything I need, and I don't have to wonder what notebook did I put that in, or where did I shuffle that off to, or what was I going to do on this date? I know where to find everything. And so that took really knowing what I need to function and what I need to be doing. And it's, for me, it's not an inexpensive calendar. And so I told my husband I was going to buy this the first year I did. And he was like, you're going to spend $100 on like a calendar. I'm like, let me just try it. And it changed my world and the way I function. And he could see me starting to relax. And so he's like, okay, I won't say anything about like your organizer. And I've been doing this now for several years, and it helps me because I know exactly where I am. I stay on task. I don't miss as many deadlines as I was before, or I wasn't having those like sneaking up like, oh my God, tomorrow's January, 28th, and this is due that date. Because I reference it daily and look ahead. What do I need to be working on? And then I can also see what I have scheduled for this day. So, oh, guess what? I've got 3 hours in the morning where I'm supposed to be doing, grading. So I know that that's my time to be doing that. And that's been incredibly helpful for me.
Thanks, Jessica. I know it does seem crazy, right, to invest in such things. I did the same thing, but with a digital organizer, and it was amazing, right? It was like the best investment ever.
Like life-changing.
Yeah. Maggie, do you want to chime in?
Sure. So I use Google Calendars for everything. That's my sort of lifeline to making sure I get everything done. So, I'll put in, and I also use, I think it's Google Tasks, or I think it's called Google Tasks, right? For, more day-to-day things and such, or like reminders to write like a student recommendation or something like that. I really make a note of trying to coordinate like activities with other activities. So like if I know I have like Colt's committee meeting is at 8 a.m. on Thursdays, right? So Thursdays, then I try to make that where I also have office hours, right? So like I just basically have to show up and be somewhere, right? And then kind of keep those activities similar. Like if I had to go from a day of meetings to like focusing on my research, that would throw me off, and I wouldn't get any of the things done. So I do try to group things in a way that there's similar tasks on similar days, so that I'm not spreading myself too thin, trying to jump from like one context to another, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I use a lot of the reminders as well. So I'll have it send me a 2-week reminder, by email and such, just to kind of get it refreshed in my mind, because usually I'm looking at like that week, I'm not looking too far ahead, but that helps me a lot. So I on any given event, I probably have 3 reminders, like a notification 10 minutes before, maybe 2 hours before, and then like a week in advance. That way it's just kind of on my radar and has come back to the forefront of my mind. And that's like especially helpful with like outside appointments and such too, right? If I'm like kind of focused on work and I forget that like, oh, I have a doctor's appointment or, something like that, it kind of brings it to the forefront. And I'll even do things like, I know I have a physical coming up in June. So the week before, I made a note in an event to call my doctor to get my blood work requisition, right? So that way I can get that done and then I'll be ready for that doctor's appointment that day. So, or that following week. And so, I do try to plan out the things that I know I'm going to need to get done before those big events happen. And I put all of that right into my calendar. So I'm a big fan of the Google Calendar and, how it keeps me structured and organized.
And reminders.
And reminders, yes.
I see Jason. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I have a Google Home, which, is, probably dangerous in different ways, but I'll, in the mornings, like when I'm, working and I'm like, oh, I know I have this event at 3 p.m. I'll like, have my Google Home remind me at like 2:50 that I have, this meeting. And so that way, if I'm not near my phone or, I'm, really into working, it kind of pulls me back to remembering that. So I use a lot of tech to keep me organized.
And a lot of reminders.
Yes.
It looks like Jason's wants to jump in, and I also am starting to get some participant questions as well. So folks that are joining us, you can start populating the chat. We're going to switch to that in just a second, right after Jason jumps in.
I'll make it fast, I promise. So I like what Maggie was saying about trying to find ways, like when you're on campus, to find things that kind of align in some ways in terms of mindset. I also think that works for research, especially when you're first starting out, right? You don't have to I want to understand the subjective experience of walking on the moon, right? Which would be a whole lot of IRB headaches and everything else, right? Now I got to talk to NASA and get approval from the government, whatever. You can find ways to start doing some research, maybe in your classroom, maybe in terms of the way you're advising, or a new type of technique you're utilizing with something that you do with your students. There's a lot of ways to kind of integrate, and think about research a little bit outside the box, just to get your feet wet and get, some writing under your belt to build that confidence. When I first started out, some of my research was related to integrating different metaphors and stories into classroom to kind of enhance the reflective practice of students. And I collaborated with others that would run the focus groups, because obviously I was the instructor. There was different ways to kind of do that, but it really simplified things, because some of these different places, that three-legged stool, so to speak, was overlapping. And so it made it easier for me to get started. Now, sometimes I'm doing things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing specifically in the classroom. But when I first started out, that was really helpful to find ways to kind of have that overlap.
That's a great point, Jason. There's a lot of times that service to the college, for example, or to our community can be tied to our scholarship or to our classroom work, and that you can find those connections. They're not always obvious initially. And sometimes it takes others to kind of point that out. We had a question too about, different departments have different course loads, and how does that influence your ability to balance your time? So does anyone want to pick up that question? Maggie?
I will, just in that my department, I'm teaching a 3-3, which I do think gives me some more time for research and, allows me to be more productive in that area. The other thing that I think is also, I don't know if it's unique or, just I think kind of common in our department, is that we do tend to, especially for junior faculty who are just starting out, we tend to offer multiple sections of a particular course. So, I think my first semester here, I taught 3 sections of the same course, which was, super helpful for me in getting established here at the university. It helped me kind of transition from that grad school life to, a full-time academic job. Which was, I think really helpful. So I do think that when departments are really flexible in, kind of working with faculty's strengths and, not loading on multiple new preparations each semester. I think that makes a huge difference. So I feel like I've been lucky, though I also tend to volunteer myself for new preps each semester, which is, I think I usually have, between 1 and 2 new preps, a semester. But I do know that if I need a semester where where 2 new preps is just going to be too much with whatever else is going on, I feel like I can have that conversation with my chair, and they work, and he works with me to to make that happen as best as they can.
I'd also add, when I'm building my class, there's sort of an ebb and flow to the type of work that we do, right? We know that April is going to be madness into, the second or third week in May, and then all of a sudden it's going to let up. We've got this other time. And so I've sort of learned to embrace that ebb and flow. And when I do my course design, I take a little bit of extra time up front. So this is what I've been doing the past couple of weeks, where I align my syllabi, especially if I'm teaching different courses, so that I don't have all my papers due on Friday, February 15th. So I do a really, I'm really cognizant and careful about staggering the work that's due in my classes. So that way I don't just get an influx of 90 papers or 150 papers, except when I teach the large lecture that has 150 students, and I can't avoid it. But and to be aware of not just what's being due or when it's being due, but what's being due. So if it's like the smaller assignment that I can work through pretty quickly, I maybe can collect some of those, at the same time as other things are coming in. But if I've got a big research paper that's due, I don't schedule another paper due in my other classes the following Monday, because that's not going to work for me. And so I spend the extra time when I'm doing my course development to be cognizant of when and where things are doing, what activities I have students doing, especially if you're doing 2 or 3 different preps.
So I want to open it up, and are there any participants that have a question that you're dying to ask this really great panel? Give folks a chance.
So I've got one for you.
Of course you do, Kristen.
How could your chairs and deans, what could we do that could help to support you in all of this, and potentially newer faculty who may not have had the opportunity to develop the same skill set yet? Because we all know that people are juggling all kinds of roles throughout their career, but the juggling you do as a new assistant professor is different than the juggling you did prior, even if it was as an assistant professor at a different institution.
That's a great question. Who's going to jump in? It looks like Jason and then Carolina.
I think
it looks like Francisco's on deck too.
I mean, real quick, one of the things that I think is would have been helpful for me when I first started out, and I started out as a visiting professor at SU, was some type of mentorship linkage with a faculty member that already was doing research and was familiar with the process and could maybe allow me to kind of work under their wings, so to speak, not taking on an entire project by myself, but just helping me kind of through that process, just like my doctoral advisor did during the dissertation process. Because as we know, the dissertation process and the research that we do after that, it's different. The audience is different. Where we're going with it is typically different. And so I found that I would think that would be very helpful. And that doesn't always happen, right? And a lot of times I feel like new faculty just don't feel confident enough to ask a more senior faculty member, hey, can I start doing research with you, right? Because they might feel that they're expected to already know how to do research, where most of us remember that the nerves we had when we first started out, like it just felt like this, Mount Everest type of task. That would be one thing I know would probably be helpful.
One trick along those lines, Jason, is to reach out to senior faculty in a different department or a different discipline and do collaborative work that way. The sneaky way I've done it, it's worked out well. I think Carolina wanted to chime in.
Yes, exactly the same idea. I think it is very important to have mentors. And I was very lucky when I came here that I had a mentor in physics department, but I also got a mentor in another department. I didn't do research with that person, but that person was a successful person, a solar person, full of energy, and gave me really good advice. And of course, I had as well my PhD advisor who mentored me. We are talking every 2 weeks in the beginning, and then every month, and then I was kind of every half a year. And he was very invested in my success, and he was also objective in a way subjective. But he told me, you cannot relax, you need to be very focused, you need not to care about unimportant things. Doesn't matter what happened, go move forward. So this was very, very important. I wanted just to add very briefly about service. We didn't talk directly, but I think some people are very afraid when they come, they start as assistant professors that service will eat a lot of their time. Indeed, during the first year, people don't do as much service. However, I would strongly encourage the new faculty to do service. It is very important. Choose a committee you are interested in, choose a committee with people you respect, people more intelligent than you, such that you have plenty to learn from. This way you meet other people and see different point of view, different points of view. So you also get to know the campus as a community, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm really happy about our community at SUNY Oswego, and this is really balancing out the anxiety of being judged by people in your department, and it's giving you a different type of identity and perspective. So I think this is another important thing.
That's a good
Service which is meaningful for you.
That's a good tip, Carolina, is like service is an opportunity sometimes to find collaborators, mentors, and just connect across campus. And we don't always think of it that way. And if you choose ways to do service that you're interested in that align with your research interests and things, then you may find collaborators really easily too. And I know we're really at time, but I'm pretty sure Francisco wanted to chime in. So I want to make sure he can too.
Oh, very quick. Jason advised learn to say no sometimes. When I start, I feel like I need to say yes to everything because I was looking to prove myself to my colleagues, and it was overwhelming. And I would say vulnerability and honest conversation with everybody. I'm lucky to have a great chair, not because she's present, where I just have honest communication. This is how I feel. This is how I'm overwhelmed with this. If you don't have that capacity to be vulnerable and to be able to express yourself to your colleagues, it's going to be very hard for you to actually move forward with your career. It could be overwhelming. You are taking care of many aspects of the university principles. So you just need to be honest and say, look, this is what I want to do, or this is the idea that I have, or I'm overwhelmed with the aspect of service in the university. Whatever it is, I think for me, what it works is that I'm working in a department that, yes, we all are very different, but I think we all have a common goal and we communicate with each other. So don't, for the new people, learn how to say no and communicate openly and honestly with your colleagues. The same with the mentor, right? That's the idea, to find somebody inside your department that you can have this relationship and establish a relationship that allow you to be honest and express what are the needs that you have.
I really appreciate all of you taking some time this afternoon to share your experiences, the authenticity that you brought to the discussion, right? Like these are your real experiences, and I know that it's really valuable. And it was great to hear across disciplines how each of you is balancing things and trying to kind of move forward and be successful in all aspects of life, right? And the advice that you've given, I think, is really great. And I know I learned a couple tips too. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.